Okay. I have been searching for several days on how to actually use this program and what everything does, and since nobody else seems to want to do it, I'm going to do it. So the Sentry noise gate, we're just going to go in here to edit a normal, or just the default. Here we go. All right, so the first thing here, this is kind of confusing, but I figured out what it means. So these are the crossovers, so these are the bands of the actual noise gate. So, of course it's not gonna fuck up. Oh yeah. So the first thing is the low one cannot be higher than the high one. So if you want to set the low one first, you can't. You have to set the high one first. So what these mean is that everything below the low crossover is considered the low band. Everything above the high crossover is considered the high band. Everything between is considered the medium band. And that is for all of the low, mids, and highs for the rest of the pedal. All right. So essentially, the crossovers are the bandwidth control. You can make the middle, the low, or the high as wide as you want it, or as thin as you want it. Okay, so let's see. We'll start with threshold. That's a pretty normal one. Threshold is just the level at which the gate closes or cuts off the signal. You can change that for each of the bands separately. I do believe that if you have the threshold all mapped, that it is going to change the other ones as you use the threshold knob. So if you want those to be different, you'll have to map each one separately on the knobs. But yeah, threshold, that's simple. Damping, that's pretty simple. Damping is the amount of attenuation to be applied to the signal while the gate is closed. Usually you would want it completely cut off, but sometimes you just want the sound to be reduced. So I'm going to come in here, remove this real quick. Make this easier to show. Okay, so here you can see on the graph as I bring the dampening lower, it shows you at what point the dampening will take it to. So if you have it low, it'll go down to that point. If you have the dampening high, it will just completely cut out the signal. And again, you can set the dampening for each band separately. Next is ratio. Ratio is the gate's value the gate's ratio value determines how heavily your audio signal will be attenuated when it breaches the threshold. So that's kind of hard to understand right off the gate, but if we come in here and we mess with the ratio, you can see what it's doing. Essentially, it is how heavily your audio signal is attenuated, so how quickly it will go down into the attenuated state that you have set. And again, you can set that for each band separately. Normally you would want it to cut out pretty quickly, but you can set the ratio lower if you want the attenuation to go down more gradually. Attack. The gate's attack value dictates the amount of time it takes for the gate to open and allow sound to pass through. You should use a relatively fast attack time in the neighborhood of like 1 to 5 milliseconds. Okay, so attack's pretty easy. It's just the amount of time it takes the gate to open and actually allow sound to come through. You want the attack pretty low so that you're not cutting off the first part of your playing. Hold, this one's very close to release in terms of what it does, but they have different definitions. The hold control is used to define the length of time the gate will stay open after the signal falls below the threshold. So essentially, it keeps the gate open for a specific amount of time, even after it's fallen behind the threshold that you have set. This can be useful, so if you're playing something pretty quick, but you don't want the signal to cut out, but you have little points of very little sound in there, the gate would cut out and make kind of a clipping noise. If you have this set, then it would hold the gate open for a bit so that it wouldn't close on you prematurely. The release does basically the same thing. The release control is used to define the length of time the gate takes to change from open to fully closed. So if we look over here at the map, let me change the ratio to make this easier to look at. Okay. So the release time is how long it takes for the gate to go from open up here at the straight line, and then it slopes down from about 30 to 60. That's how much time it takes to get from that amount of volume down to the lower amount of volume. You normally would want the release to be pretty quick, at least usually. But again, you can set it higher if you want it to go down more gradually. And then the knee. This one I had absolutely no idea going into this. Like, what the hell is a knee? It's really pretty simple. The knee is essentially the slope or cutoff for the EQ, or the noise gate activation. It works kind of like an EQ. So it's basically the curve of this line. So if you want it to, again, curve down instead of being really abrupt, you could set that for whichever one you wanted. You can make each band act differently. One thing that's interesting to note about the knees is that they are essentially related to ratio. So if I make this higher, it won't let me take it above that. Let's see, set it lower. Now it won't let me go above 32. Oh, no, we can still go up to 60. But the knee is controlled in part slightly by the ratio. All right, let's see there. That is the max knee for each band based on their ratio. The lower the ratio, the more aggressive the knee can be. This is just a graph of how the noise gate will react. Where the line is straight is where the gate will be open, and everything else is how the gate acts as it's closing. On the knobs, you can set each knob to whatever parameter you want. So we can do threshold, all is the main setting typically. And then you can adjust how the knob reacts to being twisted. This one's pretty easy to understand. And you can have each of the 3 settings react completely different. And you can do that for each knob. And that's about it. These are just the switches that are inside of the noise gate. And I am on the default TonePrint, but if you save it, you can name it whatever you want. And then it will save it to your user TonePrints. Here you can describe however you want. You can store it directly to your pedal, and you can go back in and edit it some more. I think that about covers everything. If I missed anything, let me know, and I will do my best to explain anything else.